a strategy around it, a platform around it, a set of messages around it, and then driving that, that agenda through to implementation.
And if I could just say, as well placed as I know Children's National is, if we made it, this issue, this platform, our top policy priority, and it was just Children's National going in and trying to make it happen, it probably wouldn't, even as good as Susan and I are. We actually do need the Army behind us, on side of us, to help make it work. And so when she talks about building coalitions, she's not talking just about, you know, our one organization, but about all of us sitting in this room, finding a way to reach a common objective and really pushing that agenda forward with one strong voice.
So I've been, I think we're at the end, but I do have one.
Wally has a sign,
a big sign that says stop.
One last question. How can JLabs, you're going to have this fabulous facility in Washington, D.C., what kind of role can that play? I know I'm excited, but I want to hear you guys.
Thank you for not letting me stop, because this was a point I wanted to make. We are thrilled to have JLabs in DC. I know that the government relations folks at J&J and we're pushing hard for this. It's a great thing for J&J. It's a great thing for children's. It's going to be a great thing for PEDS devices when we can bring policymakers just up the road and let them walk through a space and catch the vision for what's possible. Yes. In a convenient location, and you just can't emphasize enough how great it's going to be for us to have that infrastructure and that great space right there next to them. Not every member of Congress can have a JLab in their district. Linda, I mean, you can go for like 435 of these things, but I don't think that's going to happen. And in the absence of that, we can have one in their work backyard, and that's what we're doing, and we're super excited about it. It's going to make a big difference, as Melinda said, shining a brighter light, giving a bigger microphone to these issues. And we, Tonya and I have just been rooting for this since it was like a tiny concept.
Yes.
Because we understood the obvious for us and inherent government relations value that having the JLab associated with children's up at the old Walter Reed campus is going to have.
Well, thank you. Thanks to both of you. And since I went over, I guess I really do have to stop. Oh, okay,
we
good.
can take questions. We don't have to stop.
Are there questions from the audience? Melinda has a question.
Yay.
So clearly we've seen areas where there have been incentives to get industry to innovate in certain spaces like rare diseases or orphan diseases, right? So you get fast track through regulatory approval, you get a prolonged IP period. Have those options been explored as a part of this and for pediatrics? And also, you know, we have the device tax. I was on the Hill a couple days ago for AdvaMed on trying to, at minimum, suspend the device tax again for another year or repeal it because it's a very awkward tax that's on sales, and that's very hurtful, particularly for early stage companies. Any thoughts around leveraging that as an opportunity to say anybody who innovates in the pediatric space wouldn't have to have a device tax? Any thoughts on any of those ideas?
Yeah.
All those ideas.
So I'll say that from an AdvaMed perspective, and my colleagues at my firm also work on the device tax issue for AdvaMed, and so I think from an AdvaMed perspective, we believe that we will have success in getting that delay, and that is what we're absolutely focused on, is delay for the entire industry. and that's because there is an army working on it. Thank you for coming up and working on that. But certainly all things are on the table. We are interested in what a pathway should look like. We are interested in what that IP period, that return on investment capture looks like. We're certainly willing to consider anything, but when I say we need to define we too, right?
Right.
So that's the threshold question, is the doors are open, who wants to come, who wants to be part of creating something that can go forward and really come to a consensus platform, and then look to advocate for that and ultimately get it implemented across the government. That's a multi-year process. That's 2 to 6 years of work, but it's achievable if we come together and if we get to consensus on exactly what those incentives should look like. And it would necessarily be an iterative process. You would see that changing over time as you adjust to what legislative vehicles are moving, and what your policymakers' input and advice is, what the FDA table back there says about any ideas that anybody puts forward. All of those things adjust what that platform looks like, but the first thing is to get the right people around the table to create that platform.
And I would just say that from an AdvaMed perspective, we have a pediatric working group that has put some time and thought into developing a number of very initial concepts around tax credits and other things that could help move the ball forward. We would need to spend a lot more time developing those, and as Susan has said, getting the right people around the table to support those. But we have certainly, we agree that we could do more in the tax space to advance the ball for pediatric device development.
And I'd just like to add, we are looking at this also from the state level. So this is not just a conversation happening at the federal level. In the District of Columbia, we're fighting to basically protect the technology tax credit that exists within the city, but then looking in Maryland and Virginia at new opportunities. It's always a part of what we're thinking about.
John Constant Propella, thanks for all the work on the Medical Device Tax Act, and please consider a carve out for pediatrics if we don't get what we're looking for in this next go around. Following on to that, we have Vasum here from the FDA. What about the CMS involvement, and specifically Medicaid? As we've got more and more children in this country with their health care insurance being provided by Medicaid, and it's probably only going to grow. Are there any initiatives underway within CMS to get more focus on the devices that are being approved, to get them appropriate coverage in an expedited manner, faster, especially since there's so much risk with pediatrics? So, open can of worms? Sorry about that.
Well, Susan and I, we were talking about this before we came on the panel, this whole issue of making sure that when there is a product available, that it is something that is covered under not just the Medicaid insurance program, but all the private payers as well. And looking at how we advance those issues and working with the regulators to make sure that that is a part of the consideration. And then, continuing to have the conversations with CMS around how we expedite that process in this space is just an ongoing conversation.
One of our challenges is that right now CMS is currently focused on Medicaid waivers, not Medicaid mandates, right? And so what you're suggesting is really a 50-state strategy, not a federal strategy. And that's challenging. That means you take it, pick and shovel work state by state, and
hard work.
So CMS does provide some oversight of the Medicaid program and set some very broad bumpers on that program. It does not dictate specific reimbursement rates for states.
Right.
And so you have to go state by state if you'd like to see a reimbursement rate.
Well, how about with just all the de novo devices that are going to be coming out? What just about, forget about payment, let's talk about coding and coverage decisions. It'd be great to see CMS saying, hey, we'll expedite coding and coverage decisions and leave payments up to the state for pediatric devices. Is that a viable path?
Certainly something that we would love to see be part of that conversation about what does our pediatric device platform look like from an advocacy standpoint.
And
Yeah.
again, just to add, the pediatric working group, we have, AdvaMed has a payment department. Our head of payment came from the Medicaid. That's where he started his career, so he's got a lot of creativity in these areas that we've tried to take advantage of, and we've got some ideas along the lines of what you're talking about. So I'm happy to talk to you about those offline.
But as we think about how to be effective with all of these messages, it can't just be industry. It can't just be hospitals. It can't just be physicians or just patient advocates, right? It has to be all of those, because each one of those hit a different member. They take a different message from a different angle that when you work together in concert, affects change the right way. So if it's just industry, you're likely not going to see as much change as if you can get the physicians involved and the patient advocates involved in that too.
And I've just heard a couple of kind of important issues raised in just this forum today. We've said a couple of times that creating the platform, establishing the policy priorities, what is it that you want us to invest, what is a limited resource, your advocacy team, what is it that you want us focusing on? Give us the charge and we will help you figure out how to make it happen.
Do we have any other questions? Okay.
Thanks so much for this. This is really cool, something we don't get to hear a lot about. I'm just curious how easy or hard it's been to mobilize the support of other big children's hospitals around the country. Do you have clear counterparts at other hospitals that you work closely with? Or, obviously you're kind of at the center of all this in DC, but I'm wondering, the rest of the country, are there people who kind of do the same thing as you, and do you work closely with them?
Absolutely. Children's National is a member of the Children's Hospital Association. There are very active hospitals, government affairs professionals from those hospitals who come into Washington, D.C. all the time. And many of them coming from states like Texas, where they have a lot of political power, and other states where their members of Congress can make things happen. Unfortunately, in the District of Columbia, we have a delegate, so that's why we gotta rely on Maryland and Virginia. But absolutely, there are active children's hospitals all across this country.
I would say your table mate over there, Chester, was just with me Thursday on the Hill because I needed some backup from Texas to go take a message through. And so he graciously flew up for the day, did a few meetings with us in the afternoon and flew back. That's where working together comes into play. Chester has a member of Congress from Texas, Mr. Cuellar, who sits on the Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee, which happens to fund the FDA, and was instrumental in getting an extra $1 million added to the budget this year to help with FDA infrastructure and the Pediatric Device Consortia. So, go Texas. And so we were thrilled for that, and when we needed Chester to come up and do some meetings, he was able to do that. That was by way of relationship with Koali and the Pediatric Device Consortia, right? What we're talking about is that times 200, where we can call AAP and say, we need your Alaska member from Juneau to make this phone call to Lisa Murkowski's office, and AdvaMed, can you get this device company from Illinois to contact Senator Durbin on this thing? When you have a broader coalition, you have the right message with the right member, and it works better.
And I'm Ernesto Chinona. I'm with the Maryland Department of Commerce. Thank you so much for all the kudos. We do have wonderful programs in Maryland. We have a robust medical device industry, and part of that, which isn't PEDS. And so I guess my question to you is, how do you envision us working together? How can we best prepare ourselves for this new partnership, taking advantage of JLabs, taking advantage of all the new resources that DC has, as we work closely with our Virginia counterparts? I would love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts.
Well, I would say that sounds like a question for Kalale and Melinda. I know that we are always looking for opportunities to collaborate. We think that the JLabs at Walter Reed, the Children's National Research and Innovation Campus, is uniquely situated because we are proximate to Maryland, to Virginia, to all of the government agencies, and then other partners that we can have. And finding ways to learn more about the kinds of incentives and opportunity programs that you have in your state and bringing that into the district, making it an equivalent opportunity in Virginia. That's the kind of power that if we are working together, I feel like would be very helpful to making this incubator, this ecosystem that we want to create at Children's National Research and Innovation Campus really work. It's gotta be like everyone working together, big thinking, making big things happen, and strengthening this new and growing industry. I could talk more about it, but I won't.
Well, I want to thank our two panelists here. I think it's been a fabulous conversation, and I think all three of us are happy to take, conversations afterwards to help answer any other questions. And I think if you're interested in getting more involved, please approach any one of us because it's going to take a village to get pediatric device development issues headed in the right direction. So, thanks.
Very interesting topic, and I'm so fortunate to work with all three fantastic women here. Very, very rewarding. Thank you. This is a really great pleasure to introduce Lisa Becker from Abbott because the entire pediatric device community was so excited to see the Implanter Piccolo occluder device getting FDA clearance this past January, and we're very fortunate to have Lisa here to tell us about the story and the journey. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm not very good at the clickers, so we'll see how we do. Delighted to be here. Thank you, everyone. As Kalale mentioned, I'm Lisa Becker. I work at Abbott in the Structural Heart Division. I am the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs. I won't geek out on the government, but I will geek out a little bit on our product, and I love regulatory. I think it's the coolest job anywhere. I might be the only one who says that, except maybe my FDA counterparts. Okay, so it does take a village, and I think we all recognize that is the case. I'm going to go into a little bit of the mechanics on product approvals, so hopefully I'm not putting anybody to sleep. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the product. So I'll get started here with super exciting. So the foundational technology of the Piccolo product. It's part of the Amplatzer family of products. And Dr. Amplatz, about 20 years ago, had the idea that he was going to make products for the less fortunate and the people and the patients who really aren't paid attention to, and that's pediatrics. And that was really the foundation of his work. Does anybody know what this is here? Oh, come on. Close. Nitinol braiding. So there's a mandrel, and we braid nitinol wire. Tiny, tiny, thin wires onto a mandrel. The foundation of the Amplatzer products are nitinol, and it's nitinol braid. And the cool thing about nitinol is it has shape memory. So as you can take it and put it into a mold and heat the mold up, and it can be in a super cool shape. And once you take it out, you can do whatever you want with it, and it'll pop back into shape. So if you think about that, you can have something in a weird shape, and you can stretch it into a catheter. And that's really the foundation of these transcatheter delivered products, that you put it inside a tiny catheter. And what does that allow? You get some vascular or access. It's a bunch of access points wherever you get in, but you can go in through a vascular access and deliver a product with this minimally invasive approach. You get a tiny incision instead of, I took some of the pictures out of little neonates with surgery because they usually have to go in and it's an incision all the way across, and it's not good. Tiny little incision, and you can go in, and it's really quite amazing. Okay, so when I talked about the weird shapes, these are the weird shapes. So everything starts in the nitinol braid, and then it goes into this weird shape. These are little men inside the heart that are fixing holes, and that's what all these occluders do, is they fix the hole. Okay, so a little bit more about the Amplatzer device history. There's a lot of devices on there. The top are US approvals. The bottom is CE marking, and not to make the FDA folks back there feel bad, but I think 10 years from now, I'll be up here maybe talking about something that's in the opposite direction, which I kind of will be today in a moment. But normally CE mark comes first, and that grants you approval in Europe and other places around the world. And then US approval usually follows. The first duct occluder, so Piccolo is the duct occluder. The first one was CE marked in 1998. That was a long time ago. 2003 for the first one in the United States. And these were for larger pediatrics. And so I put this out here because the Amplatzer products have been for pediatrics for a long time. And I think that was groundbreaking. A lot of that didn't happen back in the early 2000s. Okay, so I don't have a pointer, but if you can see, there's an Amplatzer duct occluder, 2 additional sizes, down, look at the line for 2011 and all the way down. That was approved, and that is Piccolo. It was approved in 2011 for CE marking. But it's this tiny, tiny pea-sized product that was contraindicated for patients less than 6 kilograms. That's who it was made for, patients less than 6 kilograms. So we didn't get the indication for preemies or neonates or very small babies because we didn't have the data. I think that's probably something that we can all understand. Back in, gosh, even 5-10 years ago, thinking about doing a study in neonates or in preemies or in a baby less than 2 kilograms, it's kind of scary. And we didn't have the data. The good news now, as we move forward, everyone hopefully saw that we did get approval and we have data, and I'll talk a little bit about how we got that. Okay, so these are just the 3 generations. The reason I bring this up is because the first generation is on top. That's our duct occluder number 1, then a duct occluder number 2, and then the very small additional sizes. Why that's important in a US and anywhere else when you're gaining an approval is your first one and these are all class 3 implantables. Your first one is a PMA, and that takes a really long time. Then the next one becomes a supplement to your PMA, and that takes about 6 months to get it, and then so on and so on and so on. Okay, so keep that in mind. A 6-month approval is what we should have received. Okay, PDAA, patent ductus arteriosus. So just so we get a sense for what the problem is, because you got to have a need. You need to have a device. The device needs to solve a problem. You have to have data that represents the solution, and the benefit has to outweigh the risk, and all of that requires resources to do. So here's the problem. For any baby who's born, there's a vascular connection between the pulmonary artery and the aortic arch, and shortly after birth, it's normally closed. When it doesn't close, the poorly oxygenated blood can go in the wrong direction, and eventually it gets into really bad outcomes for the child, and eventually into some form of heart failure. There's a number on this slide, the 40 to 60%